History does not always announce itself with explosions. Sometimes it begins with words, carefully chosen, deliberately timed, and strategically delivered. When Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warned that a U.S.-initiated war would not remain limited but would erupt into a broader regional conflict, he was not speaking in the language of emotion. He was speaking in the language of deterrence. This was not a threat made in haste. It was a signal sent with precision to Washington, to Tehran's neighbors, and to the global powers watching from a distance. On Sunday, February 1st, through Iran's state-linked media, Khamenei dismissed recent U.S. military threats as nothing new. Yet in the same breath, he drew a sharp red line. If the United States starts a war, it will not be a bilateral confrontation. It will become a regional war. That single sentence carries decades of history, layers of ideology, and a complex military doctrine designed not for conventional victory, but for strategic survival. To understand the weight of this warning, we must step back. The hostility between the United States and Iran did not begin yesterday, nor with Donald Trump, nor even with the nuclear issue. Its roots go back to 1953, when a CIA-backed coup overthrew Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The moment planted a deep sense of distrust in Iranian political consciousness, a belief that American power operates not merely as a state actor, but as an interventionist force shaping other nations' destinies. Fast forward to 1979. The Islamic Revolution toppled the US-backed Shah and transformed Iran from a Western ally into an ideological adversary. The seizure of the US Embassy in Tehran and the 444-day hostage crisis cemented Iran's image in Washington as an enemy state. From that point forward, confrontation, sometimes open, often covert, became the norm. In the decades that followed, the United States relied on sanctions, isolation, and regional alliances to contain Iran. Iran, in response, developed a doctrine of asymmetric warfare, unable and unwilling to match U.S. conventional military power head-on. Tehran invested in missiles, proxy forces, cyber capabilities, and influence networks stretching from Lebanon to Yemen. This is the strategic backdrop against which Khamenei's warning must be understood. In recent months, U.S. officials have once again escalated rhetoric. Aircraft carriers, strategic bombers, and advanced fighter jets have been referenced repeatedly in public statements. The phrase, "all options are on the table," has become almost routine. To American audiences, this language signals strength and deterrence. To Iranian leadership, it signals preparation and provocation. Khamenei's response was direct and calculated. Addressing the U.S. president, explicitly referencing Donald Trump, he mocked the repeated talk of warships and military deployments. His message to the Iranian people was equally important. Do not be afraid. According to him, Iran is not intimidated by American military posturing, and it should not be. This internal messaging matters. Iran's political system depends heavily on projecting resilience. Fear, in Tehran's view, is more dangerous than bombs. By publicly rejecting intimidation, Khamenei reinforces domestic unity while signaling resolve to external adversaries. But words alone do not explain why a potential U.S. strike would ignite a regional war. For that, we must examine Iran's strategic position in the Middle East. Iran does not fight alone. Over the past 4 decades, it has cultivated a network of allies and proxies, often referred to as the axis of resistance. This includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, various militia groups in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and strategic partnerships with the Syrian government. These actors give Iran what military analysts call strategic depth. If the United States strikes Iran directly, Tehran's response would likely be multi-layered. It would not be confined to Iranian territory. Hezbollah could escalate along Israel's northern border, where it possesses an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 rockets. U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria could come under attack by allied militias. The Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes, could face serious disruption. This is why Khamenei speaks of a regional war, not as speculation but as strategy. From Washington's perspective, the military imbalance is clear. The United States spends over $800 billion annually on defense, more than the next several countries combined. Iran's defense budget is a fraction of that, estimated at around $30 billion. On paper, this looks like a one-sided contest. But wars are not won on paper. The United States learned this lesson in Iraq and Afghanistan. Superior firepower does not guarantee political success. Iran's leadership has studied these conflicts closely. Their goal is not to defeat the U.S. militarily, but to raise the cost of engagement so high that victory becomes meaningless. Economic considerations also play a central role. A regional conflict involving Iran would almost certainly disrupt energy markets. Even the perception of instability in the Persian Gulf can send oil prices soaring. For economies already strained by inflation, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical uncertainty, such a shock could be devastating. Who benefits from such a scenario? Hardliners on all sides might gain short-term political leverage. Defense industries would see increased demand, but the broader region, and indeed the global economy, would pay the price. Who loses? Civilian populations first, regional stability second, long-term global security third. This is the reality behind Khamenei's words. They are not designed to provoke applause. They are designed to prevent miscalculation. At the same time, Iran's dismissal of U.S. threats as nothing new should not be mistaken for complacency. Tehran understands that rhetoric can suddenly turn into action. The memory of the 2020 U.S. drone strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani is still fresh. That event proved that escalation can happen quickly and unpredictably. Since then, both sides have walked a dangerous line, striking indirectly, signaling strength, avoiding full-scale war. Khamenei's latest warning suggests that this balance is once again under strain. As of now, there is no declared war, but there is also no trust. Military assets are positioned. Diplomatic channels are limited. Public statements have hardened positions on both sides. This brings us to the present moment. A standoff defined not by silence, but by signals. Every statement, every deployment, every exercise is read, analyzed, and interpreted for intent. The question is no longer whether conflict is possible. The question is whether restraint is still politically viable for leaders in Washington and Tehran alike. Looking ahead, the most critical variable is not military capability, but decision-making. History shows that wars between major powers rarely begin because leaders want them. They begin because leaders miscalculate, because warnings are ignored, signals are misunderstood, or domestic pressures override strategic caution. In this context, Khamenei's warning serves multiple audiences simultaneously. To the United States, it is a deterrent, a reminder that Iran will not absorb a strike quietly. To regional allies, it is a call for preparedness. To the Iranian public, it is reassurance that the leadership is neither weak nor reckless. For Washington, the strategic dilemma is profound. A limited strike might be intended to send a message, perhaps about Iran's nuclear program or regional activities. But Iran's doctrine is built on the assumption that limited wars do not stay limited. Any U.S. action would be interpreted not in isolation, but as part of a long pattern of hostility. Internationally, reactions would be swift. Russia and China, both of whom maintain strategic relationships with Iran, would oppose U.S. military action, politically, economically, and diplomatically. European allies already wary of Middle East instability would likely urge restraint, even if they stop short of outright opposition. Meanwhile, regional states would face impossible choices. Gulf countries hosting U.S. bases would become potential targets. Israel would brace for escalation on multiple fronts. Neutrality would be difficult to maintain. The economic ripple effects cannot be overstated. A serious disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could drive oil prices well beyond $100 per barrel. Insurance costs for shipping would skyrocket. Global markets would react with volatility. Developing economies, already vulnerable, would feel the shock most acutely. There are, however, alternative scenarios. In one scenario, deterrence holds. Harsh rhetoric continues, but no direct strike occurs. Back-channel diplomacy, through intermediaries like Oman or Switzerland, quietly reduces tension. This would not resolve the underlying conflict, but it would postpone catastrophe. In another scenario, a limited clash occurs, perhaps an exchange of strikes through proxies. Both sides claim victory, step back, and avoid escalation. This is risky but not unprecedented. The most dangerous scenario is the one Khamenei warns against, a direct U.S. strike on Iranian territory. In that case, Iran's leadership would face immense pressure to respond forcefully. Failure to do so could undermine its credibility at home and abroad. Escalation would become likely, not optional. The core truth is this. The U.S.-Iran confrontation is no longer just about two countries. It is about the architecture of power in the Middle East, the future of deterrence, and the limits of military coercion in a deeply interconnected world. Khamenei's statement should therefore be read not as propaganda, but as a strategic assessment. He is telling the world that Iran has planned for this possibility, and that the consequences would extend far beyond Tehran or Washington. For policymakers, the lesson is clear. Military action may offer clarity in the short term, but it creates complexity in the long term. Restraint, though politically difficult, may be the only path that avoids a regional disaster. For the international community, silence is not neutrality. In moments like this, diplomacy is not weakness, it is necessity. And for ordinary people from Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Baghdad to Riyadh, the stakes could not be higher. Because if words fail, it will not be leaders who pay the highest price. It will be civilians caught in the crossfire of a war that no one truly controls. This is the moment we are living in. A moment where one decision, one strike, one misread signal could redraw the map of the Middle East. History is watching, and the future, as always,